What's that sound? It's For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast. Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. First thing, I've got some interesting news. A man named Graham Termarsh posted something across various forums about how he donated 3 Bally Bingo machines to a British Columbia school. And in his own words here, I came into a handful of bingo pinball machines a few years ago as part of a bulk buy. They've sat in my basement for a few years now, but we recently donated a trio of Bally Big Time machines to my son's class so they could try to get one of them resurrected and working again. The students have been working on them since January or February, and today we had our big reveal to parents, teachers, and the local media. While I've worked on EMs before, this was my first bingo repair and restoration, and so we did run into a few hiccups along the way. However, the students did a spot-on job of reading through the schematics, doing some problem solving, and figuring out what all the various little quirks were. And he linked several news reports about this, and I think that is just awesome. There's a great picture of the kids crowded around the Big Time and giving it a whirl. I think that is just incredible, and as I learned when Ava worked on the Turf King a couple years ago, kids are really interested in the mechanics of the games, and they're really interested in learning how they work and how they can fix them. These machines are very daunting. You know, they seem quite scary, even to adults. When they open up the back, you know, I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to people and they said, it's just so intimidating, all the stuff in the back box. But really, when you break it down and you teach the kids how to break it down as far as, you know, this does this thing, this does that thing, electricity flows from here to there and everywhere, and this is how the game actually functions, it's incredible how quickly they pick it up. So I just think this is an excellent thing, and I hope to see much more of this. I also think it's fantastic that it was a Bally Bingo that happened to be the restoration project. Something which is unusual, very mechanically distinct, and requires a lot of thought to get going if you've never worked on one before. So, very neat project, and I'm very excited and happy to see that they've got it going. Hopefully the first of many, and hopefully we have some new bingo pinball enthusiasts on our hands. And Big Time, I think, was an excellent choice, and I'll tell you why. There's a ton of mechanical action in that game. There are 5 magic lines. Those are the vertical columns of numbers behind the main bingo card that move up and down one position based on player input. The game has the extra ball feature, which is fairly typical with 3 extra balls, 2 super cards, and rollovers. Just a ton of game interaction and mechanical interaction that would be really fascinating to troubleshoot for your first time. So, yet again, hats off to those kids, and very impressive. Next, I wanted to highlight some of the activity that we have going on the bingo subforum on Pinside. There are a few interesting questions that have come up and been answered, and a few interesting projects as well, and I just thought I'd highlight a few of them. First off, we have a situation where a Magic Screen owner, this is one of the Magic Screen games made by Bally in the early to mid-60s, is having trouble actually moving his screen once he has the feature awarded and before the game locks him out. And he is confused as to why this happens. I can state that this exact problem has befallen me and has probably befallen everybody who has worked on these games at one point or another. The buttons, which are underneath the lock bar, the actual switches, can become maladjusted or just filled with filth, and they need to be cleaned. People spill beer and all kinds of stuff in the lock bar, and unfortunately it can pool in crud on those switches and create resistance. So eventually the switches ceased to function. Well, that was all that was needed for this person. Sometimes it's more complicated than that. There's a series of relays as well as a big unit that is mounted underneath the magic screen itself, which can also be at play. But luckily for this person, it was simply the switches underneath the lock bar, cleaning and adjusting those, which is easiest to do with the playfield lifted and with your head mounted upside down or with a mirror, so that you can easily see the entirety of the switch. It can be difficult unless you remove the switches from the game. They're mounted to a metal plate, which you can remove, although sometimes that is rusted in place because of the beer again. Or you can remove the switches, and again, sometimes those can be a bit tricky to get off. But assuming that you are able to get the switches off or able to use a mirror to check the switch state and switch cleanliness, then you should be good to go. And thankfully that was all that this person needed. On to the next one. The next one, user Terry1 has come up with an idea to replace his bikini side rails, which were metal from the factory, with wood rails. He wanted to see how the game felt. Only having room for a single bingo in his home, he preferred the feel of the wood rail games, but loves his bikini, which is a fantastic game. I certainly don't fault him for that. So he decided to mill his own side rails and mount them to the game. And it was a little confusing to me at first because I wasn't sure how he was going to mount them in such a way that they could be easily removed. However, what he ended up doing was making them basically friction fit or push tight. And so they don't come off when you play, and the weight of the machine actually holds them in place. I think that's fairly clever and certainly works well. Very cool. It looks great. So I'll post links to those things in the show notes, along with that great story about the kids learning how to fix a big time. There are 3 shows coming up this weekend. The first is the Southern Fried Game Room Expo, and that is in Atlanta, Georgia. Hopefully there will be a good EM turnout this year. I believe there has never been a bingo there, so that would be interesting if one showed up. The Northwest Pinball and Arcade Show is also this weekend in Washington State, and that I have no knowledge of whatsoever. Hopefully there's a good EM turnout there as well. I'd love to hear about it. Anybody who attends that show and happens to listen to this, let me know. How is it? And then last but not least is the Rocky Mountain Pinball Showdown, which is in Denver, Colorado, and that will be attended by Phil Bogema, who has been on this show a few times, and he is bringing 2 beautiful restorations, a Carnival Queen Magic Screen game and a Parade, which is a very unusual Magic Squares game. The Carnival Queen was actually the first Magic Screen game, and as such it's got a couple of quirks compared to some later games. For example, the time tree locks down before 5th. But same Magic Screen gameplay that you know and love from many of the other classics. And Parade is interesting in that it's the only Magic Squares game with extra lines that you can buy into. Those extra lines are unveiled all at once and contain an additional repeated 5 digits, either on the top or bottom, to be shown at random, to contribute to your main card. I think that's a really clever gimmick. Of course, I can't manage to win on that any more easily than I can on any other Magic Squares game, but I think it's very cool, and I'm really interested to hear how that goes. Thanks to Phil very much for bringing those out, and I look forward to hearing the show reports from other attendees about how much they enjoyed the beautiful bingos that he brought. In other news for me, I'm still just trucking through work. Things are going well. I'm almost to the point where I can resume some hobby life here. And I've got some big news on that front as well. I've just made a deal for a new game, and I should be picking that up in the next couple weeks, and we'll be able to get started on a new project. So I'm very excited about that. So today is actually the penultimate year of Flipperless. And for today's, I wanted to go back in time a bit to 1932. The game is Amusement Corporation of America's Ski-Doo 23, named after the then common phrase, which referred to having to leave something in a hurry. So when we talk about the playfield, it'll make a bit of sense. Looking at the playfield, it is a really interesting two-level playfield for 1932. There are a variety of interesting paisley shapes where the ball actually travels in a circle. And depending on the plunger strength, it'll either land in the hole at the top for 1,000, one directly underneath and to the left for 1,000, underneath and to the right for 1,500, or if it overshoots the 1,000, it can land in the 500 pocket. Depending again on plunger strength and exactly how you nudge and shoot the ball, you can also fall down into the lower playfield, which has skill pockets which are typical of the time period. So these pockets are worth either 50 points in the center, 100 points fanning out from the edges to the upper right and upper left, 200 points to the far left and far right, 150 points bottom left and bottom right. If you go all the way down to the bottom of the playfield on the bottom left and bottom right without hitting any of those scoring pockets, you're out. You lose the ball. But if you manage to land all the way in the center, meaning the ball has enough velocity to rocket up this curved area at the bottom and shoot back down, it will land in the small pocket labeled free play, and you get the ball back to shoot again. That must be a really cool thing to see and relatively unexpected. The balls for these games are obviously quite a bit smaller than the balls we're used to today, and typically not made of metal, although it depends on the game. Now, because of that, they are much lighter, and so gauging your plunge strength is pretty critical, because there's really no way to get it right otherwise, I guess you'd say. This game has a ball lift knob, and when you press it, it lifts the first marble or ball from the trough area and places it in the shooter lane. Once you plunge, the ball still has to make a fairly steep ascent in order to get up there, but less steep than some other games of the era. And wear in any of these components can cause some really frustrating and interesting problems, especially with increased friction as you plunge. That will reduce your speed quite a bit. So making sure that everything is clean, there's no rot, everything is aligned properly, your spring in your plunger is good, all that stuff is critical. But I think the game is fairly attractive. It uses kind of a pastel color scheme, although I'm not certain if some of that is fading. Looking at other photos, it appears that you have bright oranges, reds, purples, and a light blue. I think it's very attractive and an interesting game. The ball guides are really what makes the game very interesting, in my opinion, along with the free play pocket down at the bottom. I'm really curious to know how frequently that actually is used. Well, that's all for tonight. Thank you very much for joining me. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. You can listen to me on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram, also at Bingo Podcast. Or you can listen to me on my website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.